You've probably seen this title here, Blue Harvest. And does anyone in here know what Blue Harvest is? Has anyone ever heard of that before? Blue Harvest is a movie that never got made. Blue Harvest is a movie that never got made. And so if we go back to the year 1981, 1982, there had just been this really popular movie called Star Wars that was released. And they were working on the sequel. And there was such like a massive, people trying to find out about the next Star Wars movie, trying to figure out all the details and spoil the stuff and get on the sets. So what the Star Wars crew did for the sequel, they're working on this movie called Return of the Jedi, and they put all fake badges on, all fake promotional material, and then pretended they were working on a movie called Blue Harvest. And it was like this horror film. And what I was noticing, it's like the Star Wars font even that they used for it. But it's not really what the movie they were working on. They just pretended they were working on a movie. So people would come up and they're like, ooh, you're working on a movie. Probably in Hollywood they're always working on movies and stuff. But people are like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, we're working on a movie called Blue Harvest. And then people were just like, oh, whatever, never heard of that. And they'd move on. So they got to make the Star Wars movie in peace. And I mean, they made hats. They were all wearing Blue Harvest hats. And they had T-shirts that said Blue Harvest on it. And the people even had badges that said, I'm working on a movie called Blue Harvest. But it was all a misdirection. It was all not a scam, but, it was just to keep the fans away. A what? A scheme. Yes, it was a scheme. So, in this story tonight, we have someone who has also a bit of their scheme. They run a scam kind of like this and pretend that they're doing something that they're not. Do you guys remember last week we started talking about a guy who was David's son? His name's Absalom. Do you guys remember hearing about Absalom? And what had happened? David had all these kids. So he had a brother named Amnon. Or not David. One of his sons was named Amnon. He had a daughter named Tamar. And he had another son named Absalom. And Amnon just was a creep and raped his sister. And it was terrible. And so Absalom wanted to get him back, so he killed Amnon. Well, then Absalom, for killing his brother, then he got exiled for a while, and then he got to come back home later on. So that's the story we did last night. Absalom got to come home, but see, now that Absalom's home, he's really mad at his dad, David. He's really angry with his father because, David didn't stand up for his daughter who got raped. David just let it kind of happen and didn't do anything about it. And then Absalom did something about it. And Absalom's the one who got kicked out of the kingdom for a little while. So he's got kind of a grudge against David. Now he's back in town. And he's acting like things are okay between them now. But really, he's actually very angry at David. So that's where the story picks up tonight. And it gives us some details on Amnon in this story. And we can all read it together here. It's not in your bulletins yet. We'll get to the bulletin verses in a minute, but it says, in all Israel, there was not a man so highly praised as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. And so it's saying he was a really, really good-looking guy head to foot. And it says, whenever he cut the hair of his head, and he used to cut his hair once a year because it became too heavy for him, he would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. And so this guy was proud of his hair. And if you've ever seen pictures of Absalom, when growing up or whatever, if you ever see Absalom cartoons, he's always got crazy hair, right? Because that's like his defining feature. But it says he would cut it once a year, and it weighed 200 shekels. Does anyone in here know how much that actually is? It's actually 5 pounds. So that's quite a bit of hair to grow in a year. And I tried to look up, how much hair was this guy growing? And 5 pounds of hair. Okay, if you were someone whose hair grew really, really fast, super fast, and you let it grow out for an entire year and then cut it and weighed it, it would weigh about 1 pound. Hair does not weigh very much as hair. However, the only way you can get hair that is really heavily weighty or whatever is if you get, we call dreadlocks today. You guys know dreadlocks, you've seen that. And there's actually a way to make your hair grow into dreadlocks, and it makes it a lot heavier and thicker, of course. And so that said, that's the only way he probably could have got 5 pounds worth of hair is if he was doing this to his hair. And anyway, I'm always kind of freaked out. I'm like, how do people do that? I wouldn't want that. But anyway, so he probably had dreadlocks. And that would have probably been about the only way he would have had 5 pounds worth of hair a year. And also, Samson is believed to have had dreadlocks, and I don't know why, but he was like always historically portrayed looking like that too. So, which Samson also, if you think about his story was also a lot about his hair. So I don't know, hair. But anyway, that's Absalom's background, his appearance. People really liked him. He was good looking. He had a lot of hair, which actually is going to come into play in the future. But this is what he does. So he gets back in town. And if you want to look in the back of your bulletin too, I have these verses on your bulletin. So here's what happens as Absalom gets back into town, and David's, king, but Absalom is living near the palace, and this is what it says. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, and with 50 men to run ahead of him. So that means he was getting kind of like a following and supporters and stuff like that. And it says he would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to them, "What town are you from?" And the servant, he would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." And then Absalom would say to him, "Well, look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, and then everyone who has a complaint or a case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." And so Absalom's playing this kind of scheme. And it's on your bulletin. There's the rest of the verses right there. But see, every time someone would come up, he would say, "Well, what's your complaint? What's the grievance that you have, or what's the problem you're dealing with?" And they'd tell him, and he would say, I love how proper it sounds in the Bible. I mean, I don't know if he really talked this proper, but he'd say, "Well, look, your claims are valid and proper, but there's no representative of the king to hear you." So he's tricking people. It's a blue harvest. He's giving people a different impression than what reality is going on behind the scenes. And so people would come up, he'd say, "Oh, well, man, you got a good complaint. It makes sense. It makes sense to me. But the king, he doesn't care about that stuff. He doesn't care about you and what you're dealing with." And then he would follow it up with, "Tell you what, if I was the king, I'd make sure something got done about this. I'd make sure your claim was heard and that your problem was solved." And so you can see he's tricking people and making them think that, man, he'd just be such a better king than David. And he's just kind of playing with people. So it's a blue harvest. And, here's something to think about. Let's say that we were Israelites at this time, and maybe we knew Absalom and we'd seen how David was doing things. It's really possible we could have been on Team Absalom. We could have started to be one of these people who said, "Man, Absalom would be a way better king than his dad. He's really got it going on. He pays attention to people. His dad doesn't care about anything." We actually would probably pretty easily think that because, think about it. He's a young guy. He's a good-looking guy. He's very charismatic, obviously. He comes across as smarter than David. We look at David, and his story is just screw up after screw up, and he keeps doing things wrong. We easily probably could have been Team David ourselves. Just something to think about. But of course, Absalom, he probably would have been king with time because he was the prince. But he's going about it the wrong way, and he's basically trying to get his dad overthrown so that Absalom can take over the kingdom. So he's doing it the wrong way. And it says in the verses, do I have it here? It's in your bulletin. It says, "Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. And Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king seeking justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel." And so when I'm reading that, I'm thinking, Absalom is really a lot like the devil. If you think about how the devil operates, one thing the devil does is he is always trying to make people feel good, especially if they're living in sin. I always think about the two ways the devil lies to people. One, if someone is living in sin, then the devil is just right there patting them on the back and saying, "Hey, you're doing fine. God doesn't care about that stuff." And he just wants them to feel really good about themselves and not think about consequences and stuff like that. That's one way that the devil lies to people. But then also, if you're someone who's living righteously and, living an upright life, the devil's always going to be on your back trying to make you feel terrible, trying to make you feel, "Oh, God is so judgmental. That little thing you did wrong, he's never going to forget that." And that's really two ways the devil lies to us. If we're doing wrong, he wants us to feel good about it. And if we're doing right, he wants us to feel bad about it. And he's just always trying to pick on us and make God sound really mean and angry. So that's two ways the devil lies to us. And then also, I think the devil probably does what Absalom's doing here. He wants us to think that the king, who's God, doesn't care about our problems. He probably wants us to think, God doesn't care about you. He doesn't have time to think about what you're going through in life. He doesn't have a plan for you or whatever. God's too busy to deal with you. He probably tries to make us think that too. We talk about voices in our head sometimes. And I know people think, well, if you hear voices in your head, you're a crazy person. That's what some people will think. But I think everybody in the world probably hears voices in their head because the devil wants to put false thoughts in our head. He wants to deceive us. And so sometimes he will pop things in your head, and you might think it was your thought. It might not actually be from him. Just something. Because I've thought before, I would have a bad thought and I think, whoa, am I some terrible person for thinking that? And it probably came from the enemy. He was probably trying to put bad thoughts in my head. And so we got to be aware of that and get to know God's voice, so when the enemy's talking to us, that we know how to distinguish the truth from the thoughts he's trying to put in our head. And even Absalom's plan here, it's a lot like what the devil did with God. Absalom's trying to get his dad out of being the king so he can take over. And that's what got Satan kicked out of heaven, is that, he wanted to be God. He wanted to rule heaven. And that got Satan kicked out. So Absalom just comes across, he has a lot of things that remind me of the devil about his character. But you know what? Even there's all these bad things that Absalom's doing, all these bad examples he's giving us, we could flip them around and turn them into good things we should do. He could turn them into lessons we can learn from, especially, I think, in our witnessing. Whenever we witness to people who don't know Jesus, or we're trying to think of ways to reach out to people who don't know Jesus, I think we could take some of Absalom's principles here. Maybe you've heard of this. There used to be this popular book. It was called How to Make Friends and Influence People. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. I never read it, but anyway, Absalom's really good at making friends and influencing people. And so here's 5 things he does in this story to do that. And I think we could take these things and probably apply them to our own lives for how to reach out to people. For one thing, he respects them. He's respecting everyone who comes across. And there it is. It said in verse 3, he would tell people, well, look, your claims are valid and proper. He showed that he respected what they thought. And he wasn't blowing them off. He showed them he was actually caring about what they had to say. He was showing that what they were saying was intelligent. And we need to show people respect. It is a good thing to show people respect. And sometimes we can... here's a story that just popped in my head. One time, a few months back, I was at the homeless shelter here in town, and there was this homeless guy, and he was just over sitting at a table by himself, and he was just talking, and it was a Christian homeless shelter, so I thought, well, he's probably praying, and I was like, oh, well, that's nice that he's just not afraid to just pray in public and not afraid of what people think of him and all that. And I thought, oh, that's nice, and I just go back to what I'm doing. But then a little while later, he comes over to talk to me, and I realized this person, he was not praying, he was literally a crazy person. Not like what I said before about hearing voices. I mean, he was having conversations with invisible people. This guy was, and as I got to talking to him, he was totally nuts. So anyway, he would talk to me a while, and I was just kind of letting him talk, and I was like, okay, this guy's crazy. And then I started responding to him, and he took off his hat and put his baseball cap over his face and started talking to his hat in the middle of me talking to him. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what else to say to someone like this. So anyway, but after that, I kind of just ignored him because I was wanting him to leave me alone. And then later, I kind of felt like God convicted me and said, you still need to treat him with respect, even though he's probably doesn't even know where he is and what's going on. Still show people respect no matter what. So after that, I started trying to, I couldn't really have a conversation with him, but I tried to show him respect. So seriously, show people respect no matter how hard it is or how unimportant it might seem to do it, because he probably doesn't remember me or anything, but it's just a good thing to do. I didn't mean to talk so much about respect. Next one, Absalom listens to them. There it is. He listens to the people. And it said in verse 3 or 4 or whatever, he'd say, if only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or a case could come to me. And so he's saying, he's listening to what they're saying, and he's telling them it's important. And even though he's doing it to manipulate them, you realize there's a lot of people in life that they really just want someone who will listen to them. They have stuff on their mind, they have stuff they want to say, and it's just really good to just let people talk to you sometimes and get out what they're wanting to get out. And that can just be a really good way to build relationships. And so it's good to be one of those people that when you have a conversation with someone, let them do as much of the talking as they want to talk. Because a lot of people that's how you build relationships with people. You listen to them. You actually listen to them. Don't just let them talk and tune him out, but listen to him. Okay, and also he showed them affection. It said in verse 5, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. And, he was showing them affection right there, showing them that he cared about them. And we need to show people that we care about them too. People need to know that we're for them, that we're on their side. If they're going to listen to us about what we have to say about Jesus or about God or about the gospel or about why we believe in the Bible, well, we need to show them that we actually do care about them and that we're on their side, as in we want what's best for them. Because we don't want them to think that we're trying to manipulate them or something like that. We got to show people that we really do want what is best for their life. And we can forget that. We can assume people a lot of times, they have some agenda. They just want to make our life harder or something like that. And even like with your teachers, you might, man, that teacher just wants to make us suffer. Your teachers probably most of the time do want what's best for you. They want to help your education or whatever. I don't know why I said teachers, but just lots of people in life, authority figures, they do often want what's best for you. So try to remember that. I loved a quote I heard one time. It said, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And so that's true. Okay, also, Absalom treats everybody the same. It said in verse 6, Absalom behaved this way toward all the Israelites. Okay, so right there, he's showing everybody the same respect and affection. He's treating everybody the same. And that's something we got to do too. We got to remember that everybody, especially when we're talking about unsaved people who don't know the truth, who don't know the gospel, that it doesn't matter if they make this much money or what they don't have. Everybody needs Jesus. And so we got to treat everybody the same. And we can't just be like, well, I just want to talk to this group of people and I don't really care so much about that group. We got to treat everybody the same and show that we care about everyone. They're all equal, especially in the sight of God. Like it says in Galatians, there's no slave or free. There's no male or female. And there is a difference in genders, but he's saying it doesn't matter if someone's a man or a woman. They both need the gospel. And that's true. It doesn't matter if they're slave, they're free, rich or poor or whatever. Okay, and then one last thing. This clicker doesn't like to work sometimes. Absalom would look for opportunities. It says in verse 2, he would get up early and stand by the side of the road. And so he's so devoted to doing this, even though his plan's not so good. He's so devoted to carrying it out that he gets up early in the morning and goes and stands by the side of the road to meet people. And so right there, he's looking for opportunities. I know to do his scheme, to do his blue harvest scam. But, he's looking for opportunities to meet people. And we got to be actively looking for opportunities to witness too. Because sometimes we can think, oh, well, how am I going to get a chance to witness to people? How am I going to, I want to do it, but I just don't ever see the opportunities. And I heard this really good analogy for that in a Christian magazine not too long ago. Someone was saying, if you're wanting a certain type of car and you're thinking about it, oh, I wish I had this, Kia Sedona blue or whatever, Well, everywhere you go, you're going to see a blue Kia Sedona. You're going to notice where the blue Kia Sedonas are because it's something that you want, like you truly want it. And so you're going to notice where those are, and you're going to, ooh, is there a for sale sign on that? Or you're driving by a car lot, is there a blue Kia Sedona there? You're going to be doing that. Well, if we truly want to witness, if we truly want to reach people for Christ, then whenever we go about our lives, we're going to see opportunities. We're going to see places, oh, this would be a good place where I can say something like, something about Jesus, turn the conversation to something spiritual. This is a good place for me to do that. And because we're looking for those opportunities, we're able to find them a lot easier. They are there. God's going to bring them in our path. We just got to look for them. And so it's said there that Absalom stole the hearts of the people. And we want to steal the hearts of people too for Jesus. We want to steal them for God. So what Absalom meant for evil, we can turn some of those principles around. We can use them for good. And so just as we close tonight, Absalom would come in and he'd make a bunch of big claims about who he was and about what he came to do. But really, a lot of it was lies. He didn't care about the people like he said. He wasn't really who he said he was. But Jesus came along 1,000 years later. Jesus made a lot of claims about who he was, what he came to do. Everything that Jesus said was 100% true. Everything Jesus said was true about who he was and what he came to do. Absalom was this really good-looking guy, it said. And Jesus was not that good-looking. Now, I'm not calling Jesus ugly. And you're like, well, how do you know what Jesus looked like? Well, it says in Isaiah 53, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. It means Jesus, I don't know what he looked like, but he didn't come as some dashing, handsome man. He just came as a regular guy And he wasn't attracting people to him with his good looks or something like that. He came attracting himself with a message about who he was and what he did. Like when you look at most people running for president, I mean, they're going to be somewhat, I don't know if good looking is the word, but they're not going to be like some horrible person to look at, because otherwise people don't flock to those kind of people as much. But, when they're trying to get a following and stuff, they have something that attracts people to them. Jesus didn't use something like that. He didn't use anything like that. Absalom came as a winner. Jesus came looking like a failure. I mean, Jesus, he died, and he looked like he had lost. But in the end, he did everything he said he was going to do. He rose again. And he didn't come and he didn't say, like, follow me because I look like this, or I'm just going to give you everything that you want. If I was king, I'd just give you everything that you want. Jesus came, he said, hey, I am the king, and I'll give you everything that you need. You just need to follow me. And he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He said, no one comes to the Father but by me. And I like how he would tell his disciples, I'm going to go away for a while, and then I'm going to come back. And his disciples are like, okay, Jesus, see you later. And he'd be like, no, I'm going to die, and I'm going to rise again. And they're just like, all right, whatever, Jesus, if you say so. And he tells them, guys, I'm going to be killed, and then 3 days later, I'm going to rise from the dead. And they're just like, all right, Jesus, if you say so, and it just didn't click with them that he was going to do everything that he said he was going to do. And they go around and they're like, he speaks in these weird codes. He says he's going to die and rise again in 3 days. Like, what does that mean? But he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And I just love that. And Absalom came, and Absalom's like, if you let me be king, I'm going to do everything that you want. And Jesus just comes, he says, hey, I am going to be king, and you just need to get on board with it. Even today, people look at what Jesus said. Jesus said, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to be king over the whole earth, and I'm going to rule from Jerusalem. And people read that today, and even Christians, they're like, well, he's speaking in code. He's just going to come, and he's going to reign in our hearts. But he's going to do exactly what he said he's going to do. He's going to be king over the whole world. He says, I'm going to descend on a mountain. The mountain's going to split in two. I'm going to make Jerusalem my capital city. I'm going to rule here for 1,000 years. He's going to seriously do, guys, everything he said he's going to do. And I can't wait for that. It's not going to be a blue harvest. He's actually going to do what he said. So that gets me excited. We'll close there. So anyway, let's get to our feet. Let's pray, and I'll let you guys go home.